Good morning. It's good to be here. Happy New Year. This is a time of year where we often do two things. We look back, reflect, and we look forward and anticipate. As I look back on this year, I spent quite a bit of time here, and a lot of you have moved from faces that I recognize to people that I know, and I'm excited about that. It's been a blessing to get to know many of you, and that'll continue to grow and progress for both Amy and myself as we spend more time here. We're looking forward to that. As we do that reflection and anticipation, we sometimes look back and see the things that we've been holding on to, good things, and sometimes we look back and see things that we need to let go of. As we look to the future, we say, what future things do I want to hold on to and grasp, and what things do maybe don't have as much hold on me anymore? And it brings to mind the idea of grip. What are we holding on to? If you've ever been in a tug of war, it's been a while since I've been in a tug of war. It's usually done with a very heavy rope, and there's an opposing team and your team. You look among your people and you put the biggest, strongest guy in the back. That was never me. That's okay. It's all right with me. I was always in the middle somewhere, and you dig your feet in, and you're pulling and struggling and doing the best you can. And ultimately, your legs are much stronger muscle-wise than your forearms. So often it's the grip that you lose, and the rope slips through your hands if you've lost, or if not, it happens to the other team. But grip comes in a lot of different ways in life. Used to climb trees a lot as a kid, and you'd be climbing a tree, and once in a while you'd have a grip of a branch that was really good, and that branch would break, and problems would result. I was once climbing into a treehouse that we built, and the notion of this treehouse was just for the bigger boys. I was probably 12. And the way to keep the little kids out was that instead of having a ladder to climb up, we had an old hose, garden hose, which is a great idea, until I recognized as I climbed to the top that this hose is really old and brittle, and then next thing I knew I was laying flat on my back. Would knocked on me, but I survived. It was fine. Relatively soft landing. I've also had some interesting experiences climbing. You're on a sheer rock face and everything looks pretty solid, and all of a sudden you grip a rock that looks really solid and a chunk of rock just breaks off. And if you don't have a good plan, meaning your other 3 points of contact are solid, you're going down. So as we explore a little bit of the book of Isaiah 41, let's think about grip. Isaiah 41 begins at verse 8. I'll begin at verse 8. But thou, Israel, art my servant, Jacob, whom I have chosen, the seed of Abraham, my friend. Thou whom I have taken from the ends of the earth, and called thee from the chief men thereof, and said unto thee, Thou art my servant, I have chosen thee, and not cast thee away. Fear thou not, for I am with thee. Be not dismayed, for I am thy God. I will strengthen thee, yea, I will help thee. Yea, I will uphold thee with the right hand of my righteousness. Behold, all they that were incensed against thee shall be ashamed and confounded. They shall be as nothing, and they shall strive with thee, and they that strive with thee shall perish. Thou shalt seek them, and shall not find them, even them that contend with thee. They that war against thee shall be as nothing, and as a thing of naught. For I, the Lord thy God, will hold thy right hand, saying unto thee, Fear not, I will help thee. Fear not, thou worm Jacob, and ye men of Israel, I will help thee, saith the Lord, and thy Redeemer, the Holy One of Israel. Behold, I will make thee a new sharp threshing instrument, having teeth. Thou shalt thresh the mountains, and beat them small, and shall make the hills as chaff. Thou shalt fan them, and the wind shall carry them away, and the whirlwind shall scatter them. Thou shalt rejoice in the Lord, and shalt glory in the Holy One of Israel. When the poor and needy seek water, and there is none, and their tongue faileth for thirst, I, the Lord, will hear them. I, the God of Israel, will not forsake them. I will open rivers in high places and fountains in the midst of the valleys. I will make the wilderness a pool of water and the dry land springs of water. I'll conclude with verse 18 there. Isaiah lived at an interesting time. It was during the divided kingdom of Israel. North and south were basically separate kingdoms. And at the time that Isaiah was living, I think it was around 748 to around 700, prior to Christ being here, the Assyrians were causing a lot of trouble in the world. And at one point, even the Assyrians kind of made a deal with the northern kingdom against the southern. And there was to me, the notion of Israel divided was one thing, but even to consider conspiring and backstabbing each other to fight against each other was just a terrible thought, especially for the Lord to look at his nation, his people divided in this way. This was prior to the kind of demise of the Assyrians and then the rise of the Babylonians, and as we talked a little bit about this morning, the destruction of Israel and the temple at the time of the Babylonian incursion and taking away all the people most of the people out of Israel during the time of Daniel. I'd like to go through some of the verses here and kind of highlight some of the things that pertain to our theme today of grip, if you allow me to do that. Verses 8 and 9 indicate something really important. He refers to Israel as called and chosen. And that's kind of important because if you look at the chosen people, I mean, you could sit there at the menu of a restaurant and say, man, I've chosen to have this for dinner. But if you never call the waiter over and say, this is what I'm asking for, they don't even really know. So Israel is being defined here as the called and the chosen. So there's no question how God relates to them and understands them to be. He goes on in verse 10 to say, fear not, for they're going to be upheld with the right hand of righteousness. So he's called them, he's chosen them, and these people, Israel, are going to be upheld with the right hand of righteousness. And that's beautiful because if we understand that verse, God reaches out to not just Israel, but us today with that same right hand of righteousness. We don't deserve it. We start off life as sinful people that have ignored God and walked away from God. But what's important to know is that he's going to uphold us with the right hand of righteousness. Verse 11 says, God is going to hold us while our enemies are watching us. Behold, all they that were incensed against thee shall be ashamed and confounded. They shall be as nothing, and they shall strive with thee, and they that strive with thee shall perish. Verse 12 says, enemies are brought to naught. So God is going to hold on to us with that right hand of righteousness, and the enemies that we see around us, they're going to be brought to naught. And this is a really important prophetic word because the children of Israel are going to go through some really rough times. And because of disobedience, these verses are for them going to be prophetic, meaning for right now, as foretold by other prophets and Isaiah himself, there's going to be tough times coming your way. There's going to be destruction. There's going to be despair. But in spite of all that, in spite of this tough time coming to them, in spite of the fact that it's going to look very bleak for them, God's promised them already that, you know what, I'm going to hold on to you with the right hand of righteousness. And at some point, your enemies will be brought to naught. And you know, a lot of times when we read these verses, these Old Testament verses, it's a little bit challenging because a lot of us can't necessarily relate to the idea of enemies that are persecuting us, especially in a global sense and in a nationwide sense, as Israel was experiencing repeatedly from time to time. But we have to ask ourselves is, you know, if God is still the same God, and he still holds those who believe in him with the right hand of righteousness, what does that look like? The enemies that we face are often maybe not a nation rising up against us, although that could be the future. But even then, we're not part of Israel, and that direct correlation doesn't really apply as well. We are the new kingdom, the expanded kingdom that includes Gentiles. And for our purposes today, I think we have to look at these verses and realize that on a certain level, the enemies that we face are some things that are maybe more personal. Fears, apprehensions, an upcoming surgery. It's a scary thing. Maybe struggles with people at work, or struggles within our own family, or struggles within our own heart, temptations that we battle with, things that seek to destroy us that we have to fight against through prayer and coming close to God. Verse 15 talks about something very interesting, about making us a threshing instrument or a threshing sledge as they used in those days. And I know I've described this a long time ago in a sermon, but for those of you that aren't aware, it would be cool to have a picture to show you. But what they used back in those days to thresh wheat was a very simple device, but a kind of a brutal device if you looked at it. To thresh wheat in those days, they often had a large, wide board. And I've seen pictures of them, not necessarily with dimensions, but they look to be at least 15 or 24 or even wider inches. Imagine a large flat board, but in it are inserted rocks, sharp rocks that are kind of lined up in rows, sharp, jagged rocks lined up in many, many rows along the entire side of this threshing instrument. And that was dragged across wheat. And if you imagine wheat laid out on a threshing floor, which is often some kind of a flat, stony surface, so to speak, where you would have the wheat laid out, and you take this threshing instrument and drag it across the wheat. The stalks and the stems would kind of just get crumbled beneath those sharp, jagged stones being crossed about. And at the end of the day, you would use a fan or use the wind and lift up all the elements there, and the chaff, the segments of wheat that were light and didn't have a lot of mass to them would blow away off of the threshing floor. And what would remain was just the grain. And if we think about that, the Lord wants to turn us with his right hand of righteousness into a threshing instrument. And what that means for you and I is that the Lord wants us to be tools in his hand, to show people the difference between valuable life and vanity life, things that are important and things that are not important, things that are essential and eternal versus things that are superficial, temporary, and the word vanity encompasses a lot of things that just don't carry weight and don't have import. And the more we focus on those things that are chaff or vanity, the less value our life will have, the poorer our relationships will be. And ultimately, if we are focused on vanity, focused on chaff, those things burn and are gone and are destroyed, and our life will end. Whereas if we focus on those things that are important, that the word lays out as critical, as dynamic, as vital, as grain, then we have life eternal. We spend life eternal with him. Goes on in verse 17, talking about the poor, the needy, the thirsty. God will hear us and help us, hold us, provide for us. Verse 18 says, I will open rivers in high places and fountains in the midst of valleys. I will make the wilderness a pool of water and the dry land springs of water. I bet for the Israelites especially, those were verses that really rung true to them because they heard the stories of 40 years in the wilderness where there's times where there's no water. And, food is important, but you can go days without food. But when you don't have water, that is an immediate, direct, and critical need that God says, I will provide that. I'm going to watch over you. I'm going to hold on to you. I'll make you a threshing instrument. And when you need water, that life-giving water, I will have it. And it's interesting when you read these verses, because I think that this idea of these fountains in the midst of valleys, on a pool of water in the dry land, we think of that as a reference to those 40 years in the wilderness. But Jesus himself said, I'm going to give you water that's everlasting, that you'll never have to thirst again. And the idea of salvation being that life-giving water, this is, I think, a precursor to that for every man that walks through life, every woman that walks through life. Before they know the Lord, they're in the desert. And Christ comes and says, my salvation I offer freely to you as a thirsty person in a thirsty desert land. This is life-giving. What a great illustration of what's to come that Isaiah writes here. I'd like to kind of cover three different areas, if you will, three different concepts of God's grip on us. I'm going to ask you to stand up and do a quick illustration. First one is simply something like a handshake. Are you squeezing my hand a little bit?
A little bit.
And I'm yours as well.
All right.
And we've got something mutual here.
Yes.
I'll ask you to come stand up later. Thank you. So the idea of a handshake, God's grip on us often is a mutual thing where just like Brother Nick and I shook hands, we both squeezed a little bit and looked each other in the eye. God wants that with us. And when I say mutual, I don't say that we're equal to God by any means. But the idea of God holding us and us holding on to God, we both desire it. We both relish it. We both cherish it. We both have that connection. And, when you see someone and walk by a person on the road, on the sidewalk, you don't shake their hand because you don't know them. But a person that you maybe come across at a store or see a person in church, you grip their hand because it's a greeting. It's something that's mutual, that you want to have that connection. More than just wave across the room, you want to have that connection, palm on palm. It's a mutual thing. And the idea of that's covered here of being a threshing instrument clearly shows that God wants to have that mutual relationship with us where he's the God, he's the commander, he's the orchestrator, and we're the tool in his hand in the world. And that's a working together. That's a hand-in-hand experience. We want to know that we're doing God's will. We want to feel that grip, that mutuality that says, you know what? This is God's will, that I drag this threshing instrument across the floor and show people in the world that don't know what life in Christ is like, what true life is like when we separate the chaff, the things that blow away that are meaningless, from the grain that's really important, that's sustaining, that's life-giving. That's really important. If you look at the New Testament especially, we see that hand-holding grip that God wants to have with us is evident everywhere you look. And that example that Christ showed of having a relationship with people, a close relationship with the disciples, sharing with them, communing with them, teaching them all the time, and then sending out, go, do it. Heal the sick, help the lame to walk again, preach the words that I'm telling you. These parables that I tell you, that some of you have written down, share those parables because these are easy to retell. People can tell them to others, and it's a great way of sharing what's going on, of what's happening with this new dispensation of faith for mankind in the world. Have you ever been part of a well-oiled machine, as they say? It's a tremendous experience. And if you think about when you've been part of a group or a business situation that was terrible, didn't work at all, we've all had both experiences, but the joy of being part of a well-oiled machine is a great experience. When God is at the helm and says, here's what I need you to do, and you get part of a team. I'm obviously talking about a church group here where we have the principles of God in a book. We have the Spirit of God working with us, and everyone comes together. The people that preach. The people that sing. The people that play the piano. And everyone takes their part. People taking care of children and ministering and helping them. People taking care of food and helping with that. A great example is your retreat. As a young man, part of Woodcliff Lake, we had retreats as part of the youth group And that was a great experience. We all worked together. We all did different things in working together and making that happen. And in a big way, the retreat that you have here is kind of based on that structure. But what's better about it is that almost everybody goes. It's an amazing experience to watch. People from all walks of life, people from all ages, from little kids in strollers to white-haired people. I'm part of that crowd now. All participating, doing their part, sharing, and it's not even just the work that's taking place. There's a lot of things that happen to make that happen. There's a whole list of things. You're going to do this, you're going to do this, you're going to bring that, you bring that. But even just I don't want to call it the work, but it is on a good work of fellowship where you're going to a separate location, you're spending tons of time together, you're sequestered from the world, and you're just working together and having an experience that is off the beaten path. And that's what makes it memorable, and I think that's why so many people want to go, because it's different, it's unique, it's binding, it's great fellowship, and it's something that binds us together. Church does that. But special occasions do that, I think, on a certain deeper level, because everyone's got their sleeves all rolled up. Everyone's part of this well-oiled machine, and it's been going on for how many years now? Many. And it's not losing steam, which is a great, great thing. So that's exciting. It's a quote from a man that I read, and I didn't even write down who it was, so that's my fault. But it's not a guy that I agree with a lot, but he said something very interesting. Looking at the way things are in the world right now, he said, and this is a paraphrase, he said, "We must recognize the progress we've made in the world that we live in. If we don't recognize progress and improvement and only focus on flaws and past misdeeds, we destroy hope and even motivation." I thought that was a really relevant thing and very powerful. And, so we have to ask ourselves, this year, do we want to wallow in the defeats and difficulties of the past? Or do we want to move forward with a hand-in-hand grip on our Redeemer and saying, "Lord, help me to thresh the floor here, to thresh the wheat, and help me to do the things you want me to do, to build your kingdom, to help people around me, and just let people know what you have for us as your kingdom effective in this world right now." Second kind of grip, I'll ask you to stand up again, is a different grip. I want you to hold my wrist here. Have you ever seen a movie scene where the one guy's over the cliff, and he's heading here, and it's like, "I'm weak, I'm about to die, and you're just hanging on to me." That's a very one-sided grip. It's very one-sided, and I'm really not doing anything. And in the movie, you're like, if it's a good guy that's hanging off, that's weak, that's beaten up, you're hoping that, man, this guy you got the strength to pull him up over. That's a very different kind of grip. Because in this case, he had my hand at the wrist. And really, I wasn't holding it all, but relying on him to pull me back up over the pulpit, off the cliff. And that's an experience we also know takes place with the Lord. When we lose that ability to hang on to God in a tight way, that mutual grip, what causes that? Things like fatigue, sorrow, despair, long-term trials or multiple trials that kind of add up sometimes, discouragement, hopelessness, and sometimes it's simply distraction, where we've been pulled away from that grip of the Lord and we've been grabbing onto all of the kinds of things, and all of a sudden we find ourselves in peril. And we reach out, "I'm weak, I was not near you," and we feel that strong hand of God that has us. God doesn't let go. Psalm 27:10 says this, even if my father and mother abandon me, the Lord will hold me close. God's the heroic one, but we're hanging off the side of a cliff, isn't it? The case? We can all relate to that to a certain degree, I'm sure. And it might be times where you look back in your life and you can say, you know what, I really let go of the hand of God. I really started relying on my own strength. Maybe it was because we were overwhelmed and we just kind of were giving up. Or maybe life was going so well and we were feeling so self-assured that we're like, I got this. I got this all figured out. And in both cases, we're in great peril. When we're arrogant and dismissive, God still holds on to us. When we're fatigued, discouraged, he still holds on. When we've been beaten up by life and really had a tough go of it, maybe over the last few weeks or months or longer, God doesn't let go. God inspires. And while there was a great expression on Nick's face of hanging on, like it was hard, and I'm not saying that it doesn't take God effort to hold on to us, but it's not, I might have concern about Nick pulling me off over the cliff, but I don't have concern about God pulling me up over that cliff. Because his strength is unending. His power is undeniable. His grip is sure. The last kind of grip is very different. You may not even think of it as a grip, but I'll call it God's enfolding embrace. I'm not going to hug you right now. We don't need that. But the idea of that kind of grip that God has on us is very different, and it stirs a very different kind of emotion in us, doesn't it? I said before, you see someone in the street, you shake their hand, it's nice to see you, haven't seen you in a while, coworker, whatever. But if it's a family member that you haven't seen in a while, some of the Zoys are here, I hadn't seen them since, I guess, the summer. And I am, without question, I embrace them all. Because it's just another level of contact, another level of caring, to show that, if I would have seen Tom and Di or Brian and Caitlin and just shook their hand, they'd have been like, is there a problem here? But that didn't happen because there isn't. And I'm excited about that. But that's the kind of thing that happens when we are unfolded into someone's embrace. It's more than a handshake. And think of the times when you embrace someone, not just when you see them and haven't seen them in a while, but if someone's going through a real difficult time and you see them and you could tell on their face that they're discouraged or there's tears in their eyes, a handshake doesn't really cut it. Especially if you know them well. Man, you embrace them. You enfold them in your arms to show them that I care about you. I'm here for you. That's a powerful thing. In Luke 15:20, is the end of the parable of the prodigal son. It says, so he returned home to his father, and while he was still a long way off, his father saw him coming. Filled with love and compassion, he ran to his son and embraced him and kissed him. That's God the Father. That's a parable describing God. And what's beautiful about that story is, in the real world, if we look at the situation that happens at the prodigal son, I'm not going to go into detail. All of you pretty much know the story. A son says, you know what? I'm out of here. I want my inheritance right now. I got to go. And that son takes his inheritance and goes. And we don't know how much time, but it's probably months, if not years later. That son's returning, and that son's returning in a way where it looks like he's dissolute, he's desperate, he's broke, he's filthy. And the father, in the real world, many fathers would say, you know what, don't even come in. You've got your money, I don't want to see you anymore. Or would at least say, you're a disaster. You got what you deserve. Go work in the field. No, this father runs out there to that filthy, broke son and embraces him. Does that not tell you the heart of our Father, God? That's amazing. And that kind of enfolding grip is something that I think a lot of us experienced at the moment when we realized that we were wretched and poor and broken. And God says, here is salvation, and embraces us in that love that we didn't deserve. That's amazing. What an experience. It speaks to the character of God. And make no mistake that embrace that God offers at that moment where we recognize our lost state, that's something that is not just held for that moment. I think all of us can remember times where we've been through difficulty and God has pulled us up off of the cliff, and we recognize the grace and the mercy that he still affords to us. That is a powerful thing when we maybe come into a place where we read the word or we're back in church and we recognize that this God is amazing. He wants to work with me hand in hand. He wants to pull me off the cliff, and he wants to embrace me when I see that in spite of the fact that salvation has been mine, I still disappoint. I still discourage him. I still walk back to him filthy sometimes and broken down, knowing that the only place for me is in that embrace of God the Father, who loves us so much. Verse in Deuteronomy says this: the eternal God is your refuge, and his everlasting arms are under you. He drives out the enemy before you. He cries out, destroy them. This NLT version is really cool. It says, and his everlasting arms are under you. Have you ever lifted someone in a state of despair and they're literally hanging on you? His arms are under us. Another verse in Isaiah 46:4 says this: I will be your God throughout your lifetime until your hair is white with age. I made you. I will care for you. I will carry you along and save you. That's yet another, version of the embrace that God offers. That not just embrace, but physically carrying you. Is that amazing? So many people that don't know the Word, don't know God, they hear a little bit snippets and pieces, and they don't like God because they think of him as this harsh judge in heaven, striking people down with lightning, and they don't realize the magnitude of God's grip on humanity that he desires to have with everyone, to hold our hand, to save us, to embrace us, and even to carry us. What more can you ask for a person when you're weak than that they carry you? I mean, are you putting any effort in at all at this point? No. You're just being carried in a sort of loving embrace, if you will. God having us fully in his grip. As we look at this year upcoming and look back on the year in the past, it's really important for me, and perhaps for you, to recognize how many times God has said, take my hand, work with me. Thresh the floor of the people around you so that they can see who I am, truly and clearly have a clear understanding of my majesty, of my power, and of my grace, and of my salvation, and of my willingness to hold people to the point of carrying them. I have to look back and see those opportunities I've had, recognize the opportunities I've missed, and look forward to say, you know what, Lord, I want to be in a position where you never have to have me by the wrist, but I know that if I need you to do that, you have me, even if I'm off the cliff. But to recognize that the God that we know and love in this coming year is a God whose grip on us is everlasting. We need to abide in his word. We need to pray, fast when necessary, be in church, be engaged in understanding what eschatology is and what the end times look like so that we're familiar. We don't have to understand it all, but we need to be familiar. Going forward, we need to understand that much more than we need to have a grip on God, we need to understand that God has a grip on us. And that is a gift that every person in this world needs. People that don't know God or only understand him in that small way, we have to get rid of the chaff that's around them. Let them to understand the true meaning of the grain of salvation, the water of life, and help them to understand this God is immense and amazing. A holding God, an embracing God, a loving God. So do that with me. Those around you that don't know the Lord yet, be that threshing instrument. Separate the wheat from the chaff for them. Bring them the water of life. And know that God's got them and got me and got you firmly in his grip.